With the latest version of Visual Studio and .NET 5, there have been a few really powerful changes to desktop development in C#. In this video, we're going to be looking at the changes specifically to WinForms and WPF development, along with the reintroduction to ClickOnce in .NET. Now, if this is your first video you've watched of mine, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. I provide videos twice a week here on YouTube to help you grow as a developer. I also have a full set of training courses on IamTimCorey.com. I encourage you to check out all the resources I have to offer. Now in this video, as with most of my videos, I'm going to create some source code. If you'd like a copy of that source code, just use the link in the description. You might even get a special bonus just for downloading the source code. Okay, let's get started looking at the new features in desktop development. Here I have Visual Studio. I just upgraded, so it's now version 16.8.2. There's another minor bug fix patch they just put out today. But all these changes really apply to anything in 16.8. So let's scroll down to create a new project. We're going to start first with, I've filtered this by desktop apps. We're going to look for the Windows Form app, but not .NET Framework. If we look down here, we should find a Windows Form app that says .NET. Now, .NET is going forward, that's .NET 5. Going forward, that is the one you want to choose. For legacy things, that's when you use the .NET Framework. So .NET for Windows Forms. And we'll call this WinForm Demo. And we'll call this the desktop app demo. So we're going to create a WinForm app first because there's not a ton to show you here. At least I'm not going to go into a ton. I just want to show you that, yes, things have changed a little bit. And primarily the thing that has changed is there has been a continued work on the form designer. So that this form designer right here is now, in theory, more stable. It has more availability to bring in third-party controls into the drag and drop designer, and things just tend to work better. So we still have the common controls. We can drag a button on here. We can resize it and all the good stuff that we normally would do with WinForms. And really, in some ways, this is a return to what we used to have. It's not exactly a leap forward from a usability standpoint. Behind the scenes, it's a leap forward technologically, but in the usability, it's actually just catching up to where we had with .NET Framework. So just so you know, it's not going to look like a big deal. We do have a cool little icon here now instead of the original icon that was, I believe, blue, yellow, and red. But besides that, it feels and acts like the old designer. So I just want to point out that that is kind of a change. It's a big deal that this is actually working now right in Visual Studio rather than be a preview that only works kind of part of the time. There's still ways to go on it, but it's almost there. Now, if you are a WinForm developer, that should encourage you that there is still a lot of work being done to make sure that WinForms still works well in .NET 5. Okay, so if we right click on this project, I believe it's getting .NET, nope, it's .NET Core 3.1. We can go to 5. So this is a .NET 5 project. We can still, put labels on and all the rest. So it still works and it's still being improved upon and worked upon. So if you're a WinForm designer, just note that you can still have WinForms today, even in the very latest .NET 5. Just to be clear, WinForms is not cross-platform, even though it's powered by .NET 5, which is cross-platform in most cases. The clue is in the name Windows Forms. It's tied to Windows. Even the name is tied to Windows. All the libraries are tied to Windows, and that's not something they'll separate. So even in .NET 6, when we get MAUI, which is desktop development across all three platforms, Mac, Linux, and Windows, we still aren't going to get WinForms to work cross-platform. That'll be a separate desktop application. It will not be WinForms or WPF. So just want to point that out. But and if you're not a WinForm developer, you're saying, well, man, WinForms should just die already. Why isn't it gone already? And the answer to that is, well, because so many people use WinForms. It is still, I would guess, based upon, and this is anecdotal, based upon the people I've talked to, it might be still the most used user interface out there. And it may seem like that can't be the case because it's been surpassed by WPF or UWP or whatever else. But remember, businesses move slowly and they can't just rewrite their user interface quickly. So therefore, they're still on those user interfaces. They're still expanding those user interfaces. So it's still good to support WinForms. And I really appreciate the fact that Microsoft is supporting them. And even though WinForms was kind of the first designer, that's back in 2001 timeframe, was when WinForms came out for .NET, because it's really a port from VB6 and before. So this has been around for decades, and yet still being supported and updated with the latest code. So really appreciate Microsoft doing that. That's all I want to show WinForms. Let's go on to WPF, where I think a lot of you will be interested because there's a lot of cool stuff here, and I'm really happy with a lot of the quality of life changes they've made for WPF. So choose WPF-app.net, and we'll say this is a WPF demo. All right, we can unpin this. And this is a basic WPF app that you are probably familiar with if you've done any desktop development. It looks the same. But I do want to show you something really cool here. The first thing I usually do when I come in to create a new app is I set out my grid rows and columns. I specify how many rows and how many columns. So let's do that with this code. And let's do this. Let's specify 3 rows, 3 columns, and we'll only use the middle ones of each. So I'm going to say grid dot. Notice that IntelliSense and especially the highlighting of the most important or most used things is really helpful here. So I can hit column definition. That's really nice. IntelliSense has been improved in XAML. Really great. And then also, again, I can start typing here. I see, oh, column definition. That's what it is. I always forget with column definitions versus row definition. I have a hard time spatially thinking, left, right, up, down kind of thing. And so is it width or is it height that I specify for a column? Now, if I stop and think about it for a minute, well, a column is vertical, therefore it's the width. But if I just hit space here, it tells me, oh, width. I can hit tab. Now, here's another feature that has been missing from XAML for a long time, and it's finally in place. I want to type star, but notice my cursor is right after that star and before the close quotes. In C#, in actual C# code, at this point, I can hit the double quote character and it would just move my cursor to the other side of that double quote. In XAML, for the longest time, it would not do that. It would put an extra double quote. But now I can hit double quote and it just moves my cursor over, which makes it much, much faster when you're typing things out. So for me, that's a huge quality of life thing. That's a big deal. So I'm going to define 3 columns here. The outer columns are star, meaning they take up as much space as is available. The middle column is an auto, meaning take up only what you need. I'll do the same thing for rows. Row definition. And again, IntelliSense is going to help me move very, very quickly on this. So I'll paste that 2 more times, and I'll make this one auto. So now I have my, again, rows, the top and bottom one split the remaining space, and the middle one takes up just as much space as it needs, which right now, since there's nothing in it, it's just got a point here. There's nothing in them. So I'm going to create a little stack panel here. So let's scroll down here. I'm going to create a stack panel. And I'm going to say the orientation is vertical. Grid.row is 1. Grid.column is 1. Notice the IntelliSense, again, is really helping me out here. I don't have to pick my hands up off the keyboard or go over to the arrow keys. I can just keep typing. Really helpful. I'm going to say text box. And I'm going to say that the text box x:name is going to be first name. And let's say that the width is, let's start off at 50. And we'll put a margin on here of 5. Okay, and we're going to copy this and we'll paste it. And we'll say last name, again, margin 50. Well, that's great, but if you notice, let's move a cursor out of the grid. If you notice, that looks kind of small, but how do we know if it's small or if it's just zoomed in? Well, now there's this new feature called, well, new feature to 16.7 of Visual Studio, I believe, called design time binding. So we can say D: for design time. Notice IntelliSense comes up. You can say text. So I'm going to put the value for the text in this box. I'll say Tim. And notice I can see it says Tim. It's very, very small. I can scroll up here to my window and I say, you know what? I want the font size to be 24 for the entire object. Cool. Now I can see the size of, you know, what it says for Tim. I can do the same thing down here for last name, D: text. There we go. For Corey, I can notice, oh, that's cutting it off. I can say, well, let's do 100 and 100. And now I can see, based upon the data in this form, okay, that makes more sense for the size of my boxes. Now let's set this as a startup project. And let's run this. And when we do, we're going to see those boxes are empty. There's no values in there. And the reason why is because whenever you say D:, you're saying this is design time only. Design time is right now when I'm designing it. What this allows you to do is put sample data in your fields that doesn't affect anything at runtime. There's no repercussions. It's not like you're going to put Tim Corey in there where you have to, you know, change it or wipe it out or remember to wipe it out. Nope. That's just design time data that allows you to see what data might look like in that box. We can say, you know what? Timothy is maybe a more representative name. It's a little longer. It's got 7 characters. Is that good enough? Yeah, I think it's probably good enough, but it's probably a little tight for anything more than that. And there are names that are longer than 7 characters. Therefore, maybe I want to make some changes or tweaks. So design time binding, really cool feature. And you can bind to pretty much anything. If you notice that D: list, you can bind to a lot of things. Now it makes most sense to do things that are visible, because that's what it's about, is just the design, the look of it when it's on the screen. But you can even bind lists, and you can bind checkbox values and radio buttons and a whole bunch of other things at design time, so you can see what it might look like when it's actually filled out. So that's a really helpful feature when it comes to designing our forms in WPF. It's one that I will use all the time because I want to see what my form looks like filled out, because that makes a big difference in seeing if it really makes sense how I've built it. For example, what if I had said that the height was, I don't know, 10? Let's not go that extreme. 20. Well, if there is no design time data here, that box looks okay. It's only when I put data in it that whoops. Well, I just overwrote it and I don't want to. There we go. It's only when I put data in it that I go, oh, it doesn't make sense to make that height 20 because it cuts off the words, where if I said 50, that's just too much. And I could play around and go, okay, I think more like maybe 30, 35, something like that. Or, as you can do with the WPF, just take it off and it figures it out for itself. So that's, like I said, a really helpful feature. Just d:, and any property you can change at design time to allow you to see what it might look like in production. Now, this next feature is one that you'll probably have to turn on. So if you go to Tools, Options, and not under Environment, under Debugging, and then under Hot Reload, you want to enable Hot Reload. And in here, there's a few things that you want to look through. I currently don't have the in-app toolbar turned on, but we will use the live visual tree, which can act the same way as the live or the in-app toolbar. I'll show you both. But this is allowing XAML hot reload on document save. This checkbox needs to be checked. And it's probably good to enable this as well, enable just my XAML in the live visual tree, because then you're not mixing your code up with what comes from Microsoft. Now, if you're into Xamarin Forms, there is one more feature in here that we're not really going to cover in this video, but I want to point out, and that is the changes only, which is a preview feature for the hot reload in Xamarin Forms. Really helpful. It doesn't do a full page refresh, it just updates the feature or change that was made. So if you just change a combo box, only that combo box gets refreshed. Everything else stays the same. So really cool stuff there in Xamarin. But in this case, we're just going to look at the WPF XAML. We hit OK. And let's run this application. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring us down. Let's minimize this for a minute. That'll come later. Let's bring over our WPF app on the left here, and I'm going to try and get both on the screen if possible. So on the left here is my live visual tree. And this shows me the hierarchy of everything on the page. Notice I can right click on first name and say view source, and it goes right to that line, line 21. Even if I'm up here on a different line, and I right click and say view source, it goes right down to line 21 and shows me, oh, there's the text box that you're talking about. I can also do this, which is this second icon right here is, notice this icon right here. It's got a little square, a rectangle box with an arrow on it. It says select element in the running application. This is very familiar to you if you are a web developer and have used the developer tools in, say, Chrome, where you can click this and then select anything on your WPF application. Notice the red dots around the elements. You click on it and it takes you right to that element in the visual tree, which then you can go to view source and see the source for that. Not a big deal when you have 25 lines of XAML, but if you have 250 lines of XAML, really helpful stuff. So that's the live visual tree. You can turn on or turn off the in-app toolbar. This is the in-app toolbar by clicking this left-hand button right here that says enable in-app toolbar. Personally, I turn it off because I'm not a big fan of having it there. I feel like it messes with my application to have it, but it's up to you. If you like it, cool, go for it. For me, I turn it off, but still use the live visual tree if I need something. Because the live visual tree has everything that the in-app toolbar has. It's just in Visual Studio rather than right on your app. Okay, let's talk about hot reload because that's kind of the fun stuff here. So I'm looking at this form and going, it's just missing something. It's just not quite complete. And I go, you know what it needs? It really needs to have labels. So let's do that. Let's create labels for our stack panels here, or text boxes. So let's actually go right above the text box. We're gonna say stack panel orientation is horizontal. And we'll start with a text block. Text equals first name. And we'll put margin of 5. Like so. And then after that, I'm going to take this line out and put it right here. I'm gonna do the same thing again. Let's just copy this right here and paste it, and I'll call this last name make sure I got that right, and that should be Corey now. Make sure I got all those changes in. All right, so now I've wrapped them in stack panels, but nothing has shown up over here on the left. That's because, notice the yellow here, I haven't saved these. Oh, so I hit save. Check that out. I just hit save and boom, running application, new updates, we're good to go. So now I can say, you know what? These boxes right here, if I type out Timothy, I'm really pressing the edges here. I don't like that. What if I want to decide that, you know what, let's double that space and see how that looks. Boom. There you go. So that's the hot reload in WPF. Man, is this going to save me time. Because this is what I do. I tweak something and I look at it. I tweak something and I look at it. This is how I build all of my web pages. I get something on a screen and then I run it and I use the developer tools to say, let's move this, let's change this font size, let's move this around. I save all those changes in a notepad somewhere, and I go and I put them into my CSS and my HTML, and I refresh, or I have a hot reload opportunity, and then I do something similar to what we're doing right here, which is I make the changes, I see them reflected immediately, and then I keep tweaking and iterating. It just makes life faster. So that's kind of, for me, between the design time data and the hot reload, WPF has gotten a big boost in .NET 5. And technically, it's not even .NET 5. It's .NET 5 and Windows 3.1, and it is with Visual Studio 16.7 and above. I think that the hot reload might be 16.8. So just get the latest version of Visual Studio, and you'll be good to go. So those are the big kind of takeaways for me, that the improvements in desktop, specifically desktop development in the newest version of .NET and the newest version of Visual Studio. Those are the big ones that came across for me, except for one thing. And that one thing is kind of a big deal. It's one that people have been asking for a while. It might even warrant its own video at some point, but I think I can introduce the topic to you here and give you enough to get started at least. And that is ClickOnce Deployment. Now, I've covered Squirrel and I have covered MSIX, which are both alternate options for deployment, but ClickOnce is kind of the original old school way of deploying your application with an updater from Visual Studio easily. And it's back. It's finally back. And now you can deploy your applications using ClickOnce again. It's not perfect. It is not even necessarily up to speed where it was previously in .NET Framework time, but it's getting there. So let's talk about how to deploy our application using ClickOnce. We're going to deploy this really stellar WPF application. So let's right click on our WPF application and say publish. And we're going to say, okay, we're going to publish this to. This is the first tricky bit, is you're going to publish it to a folder. I know normally that just means putting it into a file location somewhere, but if you hit next, you now have the option of click once. My guess is at some point we're gonna surface, not we, the people of Visual Studio that are working on this are probably gonna surface click once back here. That would be what I would suggest, because it doesn't really make sense to hide it under folder when it's not really a folder deploy. But that's where it's at right now, is under folder. Click once, hit next, and this is going to ask you, okay, where do you want to deploy this, these files to? Now, for right now, I'm not using a build process, and you can use tools like Mage to work with a command line to do this on the command line and use a CI/CD process. But for just publishing it once in a while, or publishing it just a sample app, this is just fine to publish to the bin/publish folder. I hit next, and it says, okay, how are you going to install the application? Where are users going to go to find this application? Are they going to get it from a website, from a UNC path or file share, or from a CD, DVD, or USB drive? So how are you going to distribute your file and the updates? Now this is where the fact that I'm using larger fonts really comes to bite me. Because if you notice, someone didn't use their WPF hot reload to look at the screen and evaluate, or their design time data, to evaluate it and go, that's not gonna fit text very nicely. Notice there's actually text in there somewhere. In fact, if I hit Control A, if I hit Control V now, my text is in there, but all you can see is the tops of the letters. It's kind of a bummer, but it is something I'll be submitting, to see if they can fix that at some point. But I've pasted the URL in there. What URL? Well, I've got a Azure App Service website. And if we browse to this right now, there's nothing there. It just says, hey, put something here. So this is a basic web app on Azure. I just did this to show you that it can be done. You don't have to do this in order to get the demo to work. You can put it on a file share, a UNC path, or just say, no, we'll distribute it via USB drive or something like that. But I want to show off the fact that you could do this. So I put the URL in there, I hit next. Now, we have some options here for our application. The first one is, do we want to make this application work offline? We could say that you have to be online in order to work, which allows us to connect back to the mothership and make sure that it's a valid application and all the rest. But nope, we're going to allow this to work offline. That's the default. That's why I want to keep it. The next one's also default. The application will check for updates. Yes, it will. That's a good thing. You want it to be checking for updates. The published version, major, minor, build, and revision, 1000 right now, and automatically increment the revision. So every time you publish, it's going to change the revision number by 1. So the first time you publish, it'll be 1.0.0.0. If I just don't change anything, but I publish again, it's going to be 1.0.0.1, and so on. Now, there are other options in here. Application files, you can figure out which files are going. You can add files. You can say what's included or not. The prerequisites, you can say, okay, these things are prerequisites of our application. By the way, I think that I might have not moved over to .NET 5. I did not. .NET 5. Let's do it, because probably should. Okay, folder. Click once. That location. That URL. Those defaults. Oops, prerequisites. Now it says .NET 5 for 64-bit. And we can specify where to download those. Well, we're going to say download from the component vendor's website. So download from Microsoft if they don't already have .NET 5 runtime on the machine. That's really helpful because if we go to install the application and there's not .NET 5 there, it wouldn't run unless we've done a self-contained deploy, which we're not doing. So this way we can say, hey, there's a prerequisite on .NET 5 runtime, but go ahead and install it from this location. And then finally, options. You can go through the different options, publisher information, how you're going to deploy it, the manifest, the file associations, and so on. Hit next. This one is going to be important if you do this for production. Sign the ClickOnce manifest. You're going to want to sign your application and the ClickOnce deployment. As we will see when we actually run this, if you don't, it makes it messy because it's going to say, hey, this is not a validly signed application. This is an unsigned application. This is scary. You probably shouldn't do this. Are you sure you want to do this? Which is totally valid that should say that, because in general, you should only run applications that are signed, meaning the person who created the application says this is a valid application. So that if it ever gets modified by an external third party, it would fail that validation. So with this, you do want to have this, but a developer certificate is not cheap. So I am not going to cover that now. I probably will in a future video. How to create one, where to get one, how much it costs, how to set it up, what the process looks like, and so on. But for now, we're going to leave this unchecked. Just note that you're going to want to have this checked going forward for production applications. Next, configuration. Release any CPU, .NET 5 for Windows. It says -Windows here because it needs to have the bits necessary for WPF to run. WPF is not cross-platform. It has to have Windows bits. Therefore, we're saying .NET 5, the Windows version, not just the cross-platform stuff. So just note that's the difference. It is framework dependent, meaning you have to have .NET 5 installed on the target machine. If you did self-contained, that's where it put .NET 5 into your exe application, and then you can kind of bundle it all together, but that does mean a much larger application. Target runtime is portable versus a specific chipset you're targeting. That's fine. Hit finish. Okay, now we have our ClickOnce all set up. We hit publish. What it's going to do is going to build the application first. Then it's going to create the publish file or publish files. And if you click this open publish location link, it's going to take you right to Explorer at that location. There's a bunch of different files here. The important ones here are setup.exe and the WPF demo.application. What this WPF demo.application will do is it will kick off the setup process and allow you to, this has all the information for setting up your application and then launching it. So the launcher, I believe how this works is the launcher actually launches your exe application because it needs an intermediate step in order to get a .NET Core application or a .NET 5 application to launch. But then you have this application files, which has the different versions of your application. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to put this onto our web application, our Azure web app. But we're missing one file. And if you've worked with ClickOnce before, you know what file we're missing. And that is the publish.htm file, or sometimes you rename it into index.htm, but it's that web page that allows us to create a nice way to download our application. We don't have to have it. We can create our own, but that usually built for us, and it's not right now. And this is a known issue. If we go to the web page I had before, there is a under consideration. I would encourage you, I'll put the link in the description down below. I would encourage you to go to this link and upvote, to sign in first, but upvote this post, which Basically, it says, hey, you're not generating the deployment web page publish.htm when selecting install from a website. They're looking into adding this feature in the future. So if you upvote this saying, yes, I want this feature, it's going to add weight to that. So I would encourage you to go do that. I've already done that when I logged in. I'm the one upvote here. I'm not the person that created this. That's actually a person from Microsoft. But just note that this is open for consideration. They're looking at hopefully getting in for 16.9, but we'll see if it actually happens. It definitely will help if it has more backing behind it of people saying, hey, yes, I want that feature. And that goes for any feature that you see in any of these community feedback forums. If you see something that's like, yeah, I want that too, don't just say that in your head, vote. Because you saying, yes, I'm behind that too, gives voice to the person that's asking it. It gives them more of a backing and allows the team to know, okay, this is a more important feature to look at. Now, in this post, there's also a workaround. And the workaround is a little kludgy, but it works. And that is you download this file right here, which is named publish.htm.txt. You download it and you rename it by removing the .txt. So now it's publish.htm. And then you modify it. We're going to do that. So I'm going to paste the file in here. I've already renamed it to publish.htm. I'm going to right click and say, let's actually do this. Let's open up our command prompt and go to VS Code at this location. So there's code dot if you have VS Code installed in the so in this path right here. If I do code dot, that's going to open up VS Code for this folder. And there we go. And I want to open up this publish.htm. It's a bit of a mess, this file. Notice how it kind of scrolls, and that's not really helpful to read. What I'm going to do is right click on this and say format document. And that makes it longer, but it makes it much more easy to read. And then in here, we have now on line 393, we have this myapp.application. This href equals, in quotes, myapp.application. If you just search the document for myapp.application, then you can find this quite quickly. And you want to change this part right here, my app. You want to change that to whatever, let's move this out of the way and close this out, whatever your application is called. In our case, it's WPF demo.application. So come back over here and say WPF demo. Notice IntelliSense fills that in for me. It's really nice in VS Code. WPF demo.application, and that's going to launch our application. Now, if there's any other prerequisites, see it says the following are prerequisites, and it says .NET Runtime 5.0.0, the 64-bit version. But we could add our own prerequisites here if we wanted to. If there's other prerequisites, you'd add them in here as well. Control S to save this, close it out, and now our file is correct. I do want to rename this. Let's rename this to index.htm. That way I don't have to do anything in order to get Azure to work with this location. It will just say, oh, there's an index.htm file. That's probably a starting point of the web application. So let's copy, whoops, I have to go off, come back. Let's copy this path. And I'm going to open up FileZilla. FileZilla is a FTP transfer site. I'm going to open up my connection to my ClickOnce server, which right now just has one file in it, hosting start.html. I'm going to go to the path locally of my application, my publish location. I'm going to drag all those over to my hosting side, to my Azure application. When I'm done, and I go to Azure, I hit refresh. Now I have my application. Now it's called my app. I should have modified that to say WPF demo. And we can probably do that. It's not a big deal though. Also the version number is not gonna change when I do a publish. So we're gonna have to modify that. It'd be really nice if it does it created for us automatically, but it's not, and that's okay. We can get around it. Now, you may have had one question there. I just FTP'd files up to Azure. And you might say, well, how did you do that? You go to Azure, get publish profile, that downloads a text file that in it has ways to publish via web deploy and also FTP, along with the FTP URL, the FTP username, and the FTP password. So grab those out, use them to connect via FTP to your Azure application. It's quick and easy. And when you're doing these little deploys for just testing purposes, it's probably the best way of going about it instead of hooking up the CI/CD process to do your publish directly to Azure. So just want to point that out real quick, how to do that. All right, let's hit install. So this page really doesn't matter. I mean, you don't have to have this button right here. If you were to inspect this, it's actually in the lower left-hand corner. I think I can zoom in here probably. Yep, right down there. Notice that, oops, of course, it's off. But down the lower left-hand corner, it says that this is just for the setup.exe. That's all it's really doing is downloading that. So I click that, or I can hit the launch application. Let's discard this first one. Let's discard them both. Okay, launch the application, and it says, the first thing it says is, okay, this type of file can harm your computer. Do you want to keep WPF demo.application anyway? Well, yes, I want to keep it because it's not going to harm my computer. This is just not signed. So I hit keep, and then let's open up in show in a folder. And there's my folder. And if I right click on this and go to properties, you're going to see down here it says, this file came from another computer and might be blocked to help protect this computer. Check the box that says unblock and hit apply. Now run it. And you get this dialog. And this dialog says, publisher cannot be verified. Are you sure you want to install this application? The name is WPF demo. It's from ClickOnce demo.azurewebsites.net from an unknown publisher. Again, this is where the not signing has caused us some problems. It's caused at least some concerning dialogues. A lot of reds and X's, but this is just fine as long as you're the creator. It's just when you're accepting this from somebody else that would be a problem. But this is why you want to sign your applications. Anything going to production needs to be signed. So hit install. And once it installs, it's going to do a virus check on this. It's going to take a little bit the first time. But then we have our application. Not all it can do, but that's our application. Okay, so that's version 1.0. So let's get rid of that, and we don't need to do anything here except minimize, and we will close this out. Now let's make a change to our application. So we've got a stack panel here. Let's add a button with the name of, I don't know, submit button. And we'll just say submit, something like that. And let's put a margin around it as well of 5. So there's our submit button. It doesn't do anything right now. It's just we've added that file or that button. And for whatever reason we decide, yep, let's go ahead and publish this. Just hit publish again. And it's going to publish the new version, which let's go back to our FileZilla and look at the application files. And notice now we have the WPF demo for 0001 as well as 0000. So what I do is I just grab everything. I move it over, and I say over I have different file or it's newer, and it's going to upload the entire thing. With that, let's start the application again. Now, it's in my start menu. You can't see my start menu, but it's in my start menu. I'm going to click on it, and it's going to bring up this dialog here. It says, a new version of WPF demo is available. Do you want to download it now? And you have the option of saying OK or skip. So yes, I want the newest version. I hit OK. It's going to download. And there we go. My application has been updated. And now I have that really cool submit button that does nothing. So that's ClickOnce. That's really all it takes to do ClickOnce. It's a little tricky. It's a little quirky at times. But when it comes down to it, if you sign your application and if you create any kind of web page that just gives out that .application file for people to run, then they can run that on their computer. It will talk then to Azure. You don't even need to have a website in front of it, really. You just need to have those files stored in Azure. That's all this is doing at this point. It doesn't have to have any kind of web page just visual. It's just looking at Azure to say, are there new files in that web app? If there are, then I'm going to say, okay, you have a new version, and display that and update your application with that new version. So really cool stuff there. Also note that this does show up in your application apps and features section where you can add or remove applications. It'll show up as WPF demo. So you can uninstall it from there. You can also roll it back versions. So if I didn't want this version, I want the older version, I can roll it back using that remove application dialog box. So ClickOnce has a lot of nice features, especially if you just want to get a desktop app into people's hands. It's not a full installer, meaning it does not have the features of, say, an MSI installer where you can do things like change where it's installed or install databases or set up other things around it. It's not like that. That's what a full installer is for. This is more for just getting something in a user's hands that can update itself and really acts as the client, not the full application where you have, like I said, where it installs other things as well. If you want that kind of full control, you still need to use an MSI file and do it that way. So that's ClickOnce. That's the last of the big changes that I saw from desktop app development in the newest versions of Visual Studio and .NET that I thought were of interest. If you have other things that you thought were of interest as well, let me know down in the comments. Let me know if you think I missed one or think I want to add something to one of those. I might do a ClickOnce demo after 16.9 comes out. If they do fix that feature, we might get a little more in depth on that. Who knows? Maybe we'll add it into the Timco Retail Manager. We'll see. But it is a nice, at least, option to have right in Visual Studio. All right. Thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.